Hey, what's up guys? Joker here. Today we are going to be discussing latency as it pertains to PC gaming. Just like frame rates, which can be a good measure of a system's overall throughput and very important to a smooth and responsive experience, your system latency is also a major factor, especially in online competitive games. In fact, in many cases, your system latency can play an even bigger role in your performance and may be the deciding factor of who frags one or the other in an online shooter. That's why I'm happy to be partnering today with NVIDIA to discuss NVIDIA Reflex. We will be explaining what it is, how it works, and how we can easily measure system latency with the new NVIDIA Reflex Analyzer tool that is supported on new G-Sync monitors, even though you can take advantage of Reflex today, even if you don't have a monitor that supports the Analyzer tool for measuring your system latency, which is awesome to see. If you want more information on supported products and everything, it's going to be down in the description below for you to check out after the video's over. A quick definition of system latency is essentially how long it takes for your PC to process a mouse or keyboard click and deliver the end result on screen for the intended action. You click a mouse and many milliseconds later, it goes bang. Pretty simple. But there's a lot happening to make that action occur. First, you have to put in your click, then the CPU receives that information, then it's put into a render queue of a few frames, and then within some milliseconds later, it's processed by your graphics card and displayed on your screen. When you play NVIDIA Reflex supported games like Overwatch, Valorant, Fortnite, Rainbow Six Siege, or many others, that time is reduced significantly. With NVIDIA Reflex enabled, your render queue is actually cut down to 0. This helps your CPU and GPU to sync up better and reduce any bottlenecks that could potentially get in the way of you and taking out your opponent in your online games. In fact, in the past, I used to actually play Battlefield 3 competitively, and we would pretty much do anything that we possibly could in order to improve our performance, frame rate wise, and also reducing latency so that we can get the best edge possible on our competition. And on top of just lowering down certain graphics settings, maybe for better visibility, better frame rates, things along those lines, we would also even go a step further and jump into the NVIDIA control panel, which for quite some time has had an option to adjust and lower the maximum pre-rendered frames. This is essentially your render queue, and we would lower that down to 1 in order to reduce the latency as much as possible that we had control over at the time. Again, this is back on Battlefield 3. So when we say that render queue is getting reduced to 0 with NVIDIA Reflex, that is essentially what it's doing. Instead of having to go lower things like your pre-rendered frames to 1, you enabled Reflex, and it takes it a step further and reducing all of those bottlenecks and giving you the smoothest, most responsive gameplay that you can possibly experience right now on a gaming PC. To illustrate just how important latency actually is to your gaming experience, I want to show you a test that is available in the Kovaaks Aim Trainer, which is a sort of game available on Steam right now. It costs about 15 bucks, and it helps gamers practice accuracy with mouse and keyboard. You can practice things like flicks, which you might want to use in any competitive esports types of titles. But there's also some cool test challenges in here from NVIDIA that will inject latency in various different amounts so you can experience the difference in how they feel, as well as get a score at the end to measure how much latency is impacting your in-game performance. Snapping your mouse from one red circle to the next and having a new one spawn in a random location is a great way to test this. The test runs at 25 milliseconds, 55 milliseconds, and 85 milliseconds for the 3 different test passes that you can compare to one another. And I was actually extremely surprised at just how much I could feel the difference in this testing. Starting off at 25 milliseconds, this felt fairly responsive and familiar in what I would come to expect to feel in most online shooters. Going up to 55 milliseconds was definitely noticeable compared to 25 milliseconds, but I felt like I could probably still play a game online against other people, but it would certainly not be ideal, as the shooting and aiming did not feel as responsive as 25 milliseconds. Then I went up to 85 milliseconds, and with this I had absolutely zero confidence in any shot that I was making. It almost felt like the mouse had slowed down in a way. It was almost like I was kind of like moving my mouse through stew or something. It was like there was just something getting in the way of me making those precise movements. And even with these fairly large and close red circles, I was missing quite often, as I would either overshoot or undershoot where I was attempting to aim. And one could imagine if you were in an online match with a much further target and someone shooting back at you, to say the least, it would be extremely difficult to do something like get a headshot with a sniper rifle with so much latency, having trouble dialing in those really small and minute sort of, mouse movements where you might be trying to get onto something like the size of a pinhead trying to hit a headshot from, several hundred yards away. If you want to, you can actually right now start using NVIDIA Reflex and compare some of your system latency numbers using the NVIDIA overlay through the GeForce experience. It won't be as precise as the Reflex Analyzer tool, which we'll talk about in a moment, but you can utilize this on the 900 series upwards. And here's how to do it. From your desktop or even in-game if you want to, you could bring up the NVIDIA overlay just by hitting Alt and R. But if you want to customize it so that you can get latency results, you're going to want to go ahead and hit Alt-Z or Alt-Z on your keyboard, and then you're going to want to come to the cog wheel over here to get into your settings. From there, you want to go ahead and click on the HUD layout, and then go to the Performance tab right here. Up here, you can change the position of where it's going to be. If you want on the top right, top left, whatever, you can move it around to where you want to have it on screen. And you want to make sure that you are on the latency option. You can also turn it off if you want to entirely, or you can put it back on and put it on the latency. You can measure FPS or have advanced results if you want to have GPU clocks, temperatures, all that kind of stuff. You can go ahead and put that all up there too. But for the purposes of latency, that's where we're going to want to keep it at. And if you have an NVIDIA Reflex Analyzer, there will be an additional option down here for utilizing that overlay option. So that is a great tool that is available to many of you right now to monitor your latency in games, but we can actually take things a step further with the recent release of the NVIDIA Reflex Analyzer tool. Using the analyzer does require you to have a supported monitor and mouse combination to get more detailed stats, which is awesome for people that want to take advantage of it, like competitive esports players. It also serves as a great tool for reviewers like myself to get you real-time data in a more efficient manner. Thankfully, NVIDIA also provided me out with a monitor to run some testing for you guys to show how Reflex is reducing latency in my games. I was testing on the MSI Oculux NXG253R monitor, which supports 360 Hz, so it's super duper smooth. They also sent me the Razer DeathAdder V2 Pro wireless mouse, which also supports a wired mode to plug it in to the monitor, and they both support the NVIDIA Reflex Analyzer tool, which is perfect for our needs. To use the analyzer, you would connect your mouse directly into the supported monitor's USB port. The monitor has a USB pass-through that runs directly into your computer, which then receives the data from the monitor. Doing this will provide additional real-time statistics to your performance overlay from the GeForce experience. To test this, I also utilized an NVIDIA RTX 3050 graphics card. The reason I chose to use the RTX 3050 instead of my 3080 Ti, let's say, which I typically use for gaming, is that NVIDIA Reflex actually performs at its best in a GPU-bound scenario. While playing on a 3080 Ti may deliver lower overall system latency, the RTX 3050 or any other NVIDIA GPU with even less power will see a more significant reduction in latency when switching on NVIDIA Reflex, so it's going to help better illustrate the performance you could expect to see on esports title in maybe a GPU-bound situation. Taking a look at Overwatch in the training area to reduce the likelihood of any other contributing factors like other players shooting at me that could affect the results, I ran a simple test shooting 2 targets back and forth several times for about 30 seconds, as the GeForce overlay will deliver an average in the overlay for the length of time that it is running, and you can also clear this average out with a hotkey combination that you can set in the overlay settings. My first test pass was with NVIDIA Reflex completely disabled. I even ran Overwatch at 150% scale on the in-game menu at max settings to try to get a more GPU-bound scenario for the RTX 3050. The result at the end of this was an average system latency of 57.1 milliseconds, which is not that great, honestly. Without moving my character or changing anything else, I went into the game options and enabled NVIDIA Reflex with Boost. The addition of Boost makes it so latency is prioritized over everything else, and it is the best way to run Reflex, and that's the way I would suggest utilizing it if you're going to be using it in any of the supported games. With that enabled, I cleared the overlay stats with Alt-P, which was just what I had made the hotkey for clearing it. You can set it to whatever you want in the GeForce Experience settings. This is important though, so we have a fresh run of data being collected. Running the test again, I saw the average system latency reduced to 32.6 milliseconds. That is a reduction of roughly 43%. If you ask me, that is a massive reduction and one I would absolutely utilize in any game that supports NVIDIA Reflex. So that is the type of a benefit you can expect to use when activating Reflex in any of the supported titles out there. And also, please let me know if you've been using NVIDIA Reflex since its release and what your thoughts are on the technology down in the comments below. For me, it seems to be a no-brainer for the current expanding library of games that do support NVIDIA Reflex. It would honestly be foolish to not utilize it and get the best advantage that you possibly can in competitive games, or just even to reduce latency in single-player titles like God of War, for example, which does also have Reflex support, even though that's not a competitive game in any way whatsoever, unless you consider it to be competitive to compete with the AI, which, you know, one could make a case for, honestly. So, huge thanks again to NVIDIA for sponsoring this video and supplying the hardware that we needed to do all the testing for Reflex and best illustrate the results to you guys here in this video. For more information, be sure to check out the sponsor link down in the description below from NVIDIA so you can learn more about Reflex, supported titles, supported mice and monitors for the Reflex Analyzer tool and everything. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, though. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time for another video. Peace.